For Ukrainian reporters, we didn't have a choice actually. And each time when media trying to title me as a war photographer, I'm saying I'm not a war photographer. I'm photographing war because it's war in my country.
Hello and welcome to the podcast of FOTOTREFF Berlin. In the first talk of FOTOTREFF 40 on March 16, 2024, photo editor Tobias Laukemper talks with photographers Julia Kochetova and Sebastian Welz about the challenges that photographers, the media, and we as viewers face when it comes to images of war and conflict. FOTOTREFF Berlin is supported by book and offset printer Henemann, D-Light Rental Services, the Mara and Holger Kassens Stiftung, the Stiftung Westöstliche Begegnung, and MPB, the largest global platform to buy, sell and trade used photo and video kit.
Let's start with the first talk of the evening with photographers Julia Kochetova, Sebastian Welz, and the talk is moderated by Tobias Laukemper. I'll briefly introduce Tobias and then Tobias take over. Tobias Laukemper is a freelance photo editor, curator and lecturer and has worked for publications such as Die Zeit, NZZ am Sonntag, Brand 1 und Geo. And he also founded FOTOTREFF together with Anna-Charlotte Schmidt in 2014. I'll hand over the microphone over to you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm with two persons here on stage. It's Julia Kochetova and Sebastian Welz. I shortly introduce them both. Julia Kochetova is a female photojournalist and documentary filmmaker based in Kiev. She came over for this event here.
That's true. 2 trains, 1 flight, 2 cabs. Here am I. Hi, everyone.
Maybe some short details from her bio. You covered already the Maidan Revolution in 2013 and 14, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, and since then until the present you are also covering the Russian-Ukrainian war. You had numerous exhibitions in the UK, US, and France, Netherlands, etc., etc. And your works were published by Vice, Der Spiegel, Zeit, Bloomberg, Vanity Fair, Guardian, etc. I also want to introduce Sebastian, who lives in Berlin and has been a member of OSTKREUZ agency since 2019. He studied photography at Ostkreuzschule Berlin, University Applied Science Bielefeld, and the KASK in Ghent. At the moment, he is doing a stipend in Paris, that's right, in the Cité. And he worked for magazines such as Stern, Süddeutsche Zeitung, Freunde, or NZZ. In 2022, he founded the Solomiya Magazine together with, you have to help me here, Vsevolod Kazarin, right. Okay, so for me, in this preparation of the talk, all these maybe distant questions came up, like how is the life in Kiev at the moment? How is it when we look on this region from here, and how does it work out that we somehow understand just a little bit of what is happening in this state of a full-scale invasion? How does society develop when this happens, and what kind of things can you see when you talk to friends or when you're with your beloved ones? This image, which Julia sent me, which is just an image from Kiev from in the last 2 or 3 weeks. You cannot see a lot, but what struck me was a conversation with Peter Bünnagel last week at the presentation of Solomiya, where he showed me this little app, the Air Alert app. And here I could immediately see the intertwinement of a civilian and a military component and life. So you have a parking ticket next to air alerts where you have to go in the bunker. I would like to ask you in the beginning how the life in Kiev is at the moment, and how can you maybe describe to us from here how this situation feels like? Maybe Julia, you can begin as a local.
Okay, as a local. The honest answer would be that Kyiv is super chill if there is no strikes, and I would just drop you one example. I have a nice bar next door. It's a brewery, and I'm coming, and it's Tuesday evening, and there is no guest inside. And they're like really, really well-known place, usually packed. I'm just like, what's wrong? Okay, maybe like people not still in the office. And then the waiter saying like, oh, today was the strike in the morning. So like when there is a hit, in the evening we have no guests. So people don't allow themselves to drink beer if there was like in the day of hit. But tomorrow it's gonna be packed as usual. So you badly could reserve a nice table somewhere where it's delicious food. But in the moment when their danger became real, everything just different. But then like in a couple of hours, life coming back, and war actually became a routine. For sure, if we're going to talk about Kherson or Kramatorsk, because I do mostly spend my time in the eastern Ukraine, but January and starting this year, spent 3 weeks in Kherson. It's literally you have Russians on the next bank of the river. So like they shelling the city daily. You're passing and you saw people killed and burned cars, and you're just lucky to survive. And when you have a frontline city, it looks different. But Kyiv, I can't say that it's like a safe space. There is no safe space anymore. But with this app, for me, it's like funny because we, as Ukrainians, we not rely on the app anymore. If you're gonna hide and take a cover every time it's pink in your like pockets, you can't work, you can't live, like you can't actually do things. But we do have official messages from like air defense system saying like Shahed drones coming. It's just like, okay, Shahed drones, easy peasy. Like our air defense system gonna stop it. But okay, if it's ballistic rockets, probably we should go underground. So now we even measure in danger. But I would say like all my foreign colleagues, they just like, oh my God, we should like use this app. But I'm just like start laughing, saying like, don't rely on that thing, really. Like, we worry about ballistic rockets, but we're not worried about drones anymore. So.
Okay. What do you say, Sebastian? As you came to Ukraine some years ago, right?
I would say it's a good question to start with, because it's also the first mistake you can do in a way. Because asking about the distance and the unimaginability of the war events also creates some sort of like distance to those. You create the distance to the places, and by saying that we can't imagine how life is in Ukraine right now, we also keep ourselves at a safe space and say like, oh yeah, we just can't imagine, and it's so far away. In a way, we are exoticizing this place. You know, there somewhere is war, but we are here, and so on. But Ukraine is not further than Barcelona or then Sicily. It's actually very close to here. And I think the danger of the question of asking about the distance is that we kind of create it, but we should actually try to like deconstruct the distance in our minds, because it's very close. And the war which Ukrainians have to go through every day is something that can happen here also at every moment. And rather than like making the war unimaginable here, we should more work on making it imaginable, because this is actually what can probably save us from the war, hopefully. So maybe this is the job of Julia and of me, to make the war imaginable. Yeah.
Or closer. And I'm happy that I'm not the most dramatic person who like talk like this. Thank you, Sebastian.
Okay, then we just start with this, and I maybe show some works of you, Julia.
Cool.
I thought like maybe to jump in the past, we go for this image, which is a self-portrait at the 25th of February 2022. And I just ask, where is it taken and what was the situation?
That's Hotel Kramatorsk, the 10th floor, the last available room, because it's all like packed with Turkish correspondents. Everyone is waiting for a rocket falling somewhere nearby. So there were like, literally, first time in my life I thought there were like two cameras rolling 24 hours per 7. Then the chair, 2 reporters wearing bulletproof vests and helmets, 24 hours per 7, sitting during the whole night and waiting for the rocket landing behind to catch this. I met the invasion actually on assignment in Donetsk region. My close friend, who was my fixer, my driver, my security advisor, former war veteran, he just said like, hey, I have my unit fighting for Kyiv right now. I have to drive there. But I can't leave you here. And I was like, no, the actual story gonna happen in Donetsk region, so I'm staying in Kramatorsk. And he was like, Julia, you're gonna have no wheels. Like, I cannot leave you here. And then like we discussing it again and again, have 2 French colleagues badly asking to bring them to Kyiv because they have flights to Paris. Haha, there is no flights to Paris anymore. And they lost their tickets. I'm terribly sorry, Lou. But then my friend just like, we made a decision, like giving a hug to each other. He left me avocado, hipped like juice, really nice Coke. And then like he gave the pack of cigarettes, saying like, I know you don't smoke, but during the war everyone smokes. So you could trade for this pack of cigarettes something nice. And I like literally woke up answering editors and friends without actually clear understanding what's gonna happen next. And the only thing I had, I was like, okay, I should photograph this. I did have one commercial photo set right before the invasion. And the client, I photographed her before, like she came for a portrait and she was like really nervous, like nervous as a fuck. I was like, okay, the portrait gonna look like shit if you have a person who's nerving in front of the camera. And I was like, what are you worried about? Like, let's chat a bit. And she was like, Juliet, do you have a plan what you're gonna do if the war, like real war gonna start? Because the war like is what started, and Russia started it in 2014. And I told her immediately, like, I have my camera. Of course I know what I'm gonna do. And she was like, but I don't know what to do. I was like, so you should find actually the role. And in that exact moment I was like, okay, no matter what's going on, I have my camera with me and I should keep photographing. And that was such a shaky moment that I was, okay, self-portrait, a bit cheesy, but they're the most like liked and shared post which I ever did on Instagram. That's my selfie on 24th of February, where I was like so angry and I so badly wanted to say something. And I just like made a selfie posting thing like, hey world, that's the decisive moment. And you actually were feeding this monster for 8 years. Keep calling this war a crisis in Donbass, a hybrid war, or even civil war. And you actually let it happen, because silence always heals. And as social media manager for a bit, like I put hashtag Ukraine. So like 4 million views, dozens of people, thousands of people like started to following me. Some of them like right now here. And like my face over like TV episodes in Poland, in Germany, like CNN calling, like, could you join us? And I was like, huh? That was like selfie. But that also was the moment when I realized that people don't actually want to hear a war story, the general war story, like the number of victims. We don't actually care about how map is going on. Like if I would barely ask you, okay, where is the front line right now, like in Luhansk region or in Kharkiv region? What's the main city Russians are trying to capture? You barely would not tell me their right answer because you don't care. And that's fine because people actually care about people. People don't care about maps, but they care about the exact people.
You also said war is personal. What do you mean by that? And while you can explain that, I begin to flick through the images, I would say. Yeah?
Sure. Let's say Russian-Ukrainian war on this stage is already called the most documented war in the history. You've seen probably a huge amount of footage, including TikToks from trenches and like Ukrainian soldiers dancing, including satellite images where you could literally witness how Ukrainian cities are disappearing and like are being scorched. You could literally see online, like, or witness the deaths on air, and that makes this distance, like, that makes the amount of graphic content, the amount of footage which you see, it just like makes it so far and like so general, because army nature itself is about generalization. It's about like there are no individuals, you are part of army. But generalization always kills what actually matters. As well, I did feel that in all this drawn view and maps and numbers, we're losing the human, that we don't actually know what's going on when we all learn the battle for Bakhmut, but we don't know the exact name of people who sacrificed, who lost their lives, when the title became more important than individual, when this like mythic frontline or like map posted by New York Times became more important than exact Ukrainian family, when we actually started, like, it's super easy to forget about the map. Like, I swear, 1 month after, if there would be no news and no images, like, would you remember the map? Not really, but are you going to remember the exact story and exact face? That's why I realized that I badly want to give this war a face and a name. And if there would be at least one exact family which the viewers or readers gonna remember, I would think that, okay, I've done my job well. And for example, my Vice team, we always were discussing like what we wanna show foreign audience, because I mostly freelance and contribute to international outlets. And my Vice team, they were saying like, hey, we need people, and we need that like people's stories which our viewers remember after the video is ended. That's the reason.
So what you're trying to do is, in your work, also in your assignments, to give people a name and a face, right? So that the viewer can really remember and see who is that and what story has been told.
And resonate somehow, because I always say like, hey, like my brother joined the army on the second day. Like my parents' place was hit. When you're saying like how is going on in Kiev, one morning I became because Shahed drones were landing literally next door. It takes 2 minutes for me to get down to the place of the hit. And when you explain it like this for people, it's just like, oh, yeah, it's unpleasant, because now you have the exact person and you should react somehow for this story, but it gives this war a face. Like, you can't forget the face, even if you badly wanna. Like, I wish I forget some of stories I've seen so far during these 10 years. Like, I wish, but I can't. And maybe I even worry to forget it one day. I also realized that for us, as for Ukrainian photographers, photojournalists, storytellers, there is insane amount of great professionals reporting and doing their job on the ground. My colleague Mstislav Chernov, Zhenya Malaletka, Vasilisa Stepanenko, they've just got Oscars for their incredible work in Mariupol, which is like the example of what Ukrainian reporters doing right now. But for us, it's also a personal story. It's extremely personal story. And once in Drushkivka in Donetsk region, I had unpleasant chat with a foreign colleague when he came and said like, oh my God, we had such a cool story. This lady, she lost a kid and like there was the building on fire and she was crying. And I was like, what a motherfucker. Like, okay, what was her name? And he said like, oh, my fixer remember the name. Like, I don't care. I was like, oh, that's a difference. I'm not saying about everyone, but it's just like to drop it to discuss.
Do you think this is a media problem? So that means that did the interest of the media, and maybe that's also a question for you, Sebastian, develop in these years towards a different kind of a story, towards a different kind of publication, and maybe it's also sometimes controversial to your needs or to the story you would like to be told, right?
That's why I'm not the part of news agency or whatever. That's why like I'm not doing news, and I'm actually like I'm super happy and privileged to do that kind of stories I truly believe in, and have my editor supporting this approach, because I think it's not like just the fault of media industry itself. It's all about speed in which we all live. It's all about the speed how news just change each other all the time. That if you want to run a media as a business right now, you should be presented on social media. You should have like X, former Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, LinkedIn. And you should keep posting all the time what's going on, because you have competitors, because you're really trying to compete for views. But when you're trying to run for views, you definitely have a chance to lose the human somewhere in between of these news headlines.
Yes, I think same. I think that there might be also conflicts with media representatives, such as picture editors. I don't know, maybe that the reduction wants you to send different photos than you send. I don't know. How does that work out for you?
I've never faced with the fact that I was asked by editors like, oh, we need more this or more that. Once I had a question during the talk in Norway, like, what is the difference in your approach and, like, for example, your foreign colleague? And it was like, I'm looking for a human, and sometimes my colleague looking for blood. That's the difference.
Do you censor your images in that respect?
When I'm on the ground, I'm really trying to be as gentle as possible with the dust at the topic, no matter like what's going on. There was one image from Kharkiv region where we were reporting from the place. It's like mass grave of Russian soldiers, and it was on 9th May 2022, and there were ambulance workers who were like demining the bodies, checking for documents and any like pieces of evidences. And I was like literally staring at this place and seeing the different uniform, but the only thought I had in my head that could be Ukrainian uniform. That could be like the same circumstances, and I could report on the same like image, but that would be the same behavior for me as for reporter, like with the same respect to the dust. Yes, and I'm always like highlighting that there is the dust of invaders and there is the dust of defenders, but as a person who is photographing someone killed through violent way, I'm trying to be as gentle as possible in not identifying. I'm not like doing it as a criminal case. I'm not like a war crimes reporting to have an exact evidence. No, I'm doing like photojournalism. It's different. But I guess that's the only topic when I have really strict self-censorship in like showing face or any kind of marks which could identify the person. Mm-hmm. Like I always think about the family who doesn't have news yet.
Okay. You wanted to say something? I don't know.
Your sentence about you are looking for humans and the foreign reporters looking for blood reminded me very much of 2 weeks ago in Kiev. There was the presentation of Susan Sontag's book that we are probably familiar with, Regarding the Pain of Others, because it was translated into Ukrainian. And the interesting thing about this translation is that suddenly the book was read by people that were actually in this book labeled as the others. So it was actually like the title suddenly became wrong. And this is, I think, where your work is so interesting, because it's not about the others, but every person you photograph is somehow a picture about yourself or somehow part of that sort of collective body that you feel part of. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's about a mirror, for sure. It's about staring into a mirror, and I still have no honest answer. Does it help me or makes things worse, actually? So,
do you think that there's a difference in between a local photographer photographing and an international colleague photographing? And if you think there's a difference, what could be the difference?
Let's say, like, I do have a lot of examples of amazing foreign reporters who keep following this war for decades, same as I do, and who had almost the same heart as I have, and who are trying to be as close as possible and use all empathy. But all of them always have return tickets, and I could see it through the images. There is it's really, really difficult to describe, and I can't say that they are have this step back, but I always feel this return ticket mode. Mm-hmm. And for them it's probably a choice to come or not, a choice to report from Ukraine or from somewhere else, or the editor sent, whatever. But for Ukrainian reporters, we didn't have a choice actually. And each time when like media trying to title me as a war photographer, I'm saying like, I'm not a war photographer. Like I'm photographing war because it's war in my country. But when you're saying like, oh, could you go to Afghanistan for us? I'm saying like, no, one war, one and only, like only this kind of monogamy, only with this exact war. That's it.
Thanks. What do you say about that, Sebastian? How did you come to the Ukraine, and how did your magazine develop? I would also switch now to show a little bit from the magazine.
I came to Ukraine in April 2022 for the first time during the full-scale invasion. This was right after the north of Kiev was liberated. So in a way the city became safer than ever before in the previous 2 months. And the reason why I went to Kiev, I'm not sure whether there's really a justifiable reason, but the reaction of mine feeling that, okay, now I consider myself as a documentary photographer. I usually worked a lot in environments where there is a lot of news media, and then trying to find some sort of a different approach. So I felt like, okay, this is right now the only topic that I can really concentrate on, and everything else felt very meaningless to me. So I took the decision to go to Kiev, and that doesn't mean I had any plans of what I should actually do there. I remember the first attempts to do something were like really also embarrassing in a way. I remember I bought a bread in the supermarket, palanitsia. Palanitsia was the code word at checkpoints, at Ukrainian checkpoints in the first month of the war, because Russians could not really pronounce it. So I felt like, okay, I want to make a picture of palanitsia bread, and I took that picture in the flat of Mila Teshaeva, who is also a great photographer and filmmaker. And yes, and she allowed me to stay in her flat for the first time. And then I asked her if I can publish this picture, and she wrote me, "You German tourist." And she was very right. Sorry, Mila. But however, I hope I improved, and I met a very young Ukrainian photographer, Vsevolod Gazarin, who, just like me and unlike Julia, has not had any sort of war experience before. He studied photography when we met, just doing his bachelor, and kind of focused on fashion photography, which was where he tried to like get into while we were meeting, and then suddenly there was absolutely no fashion for obvious reasons. So we both didn't know how to deal with our cameras in this situation, even though we had very different backgrounds, but we felt somewhat connected in the desire to, okay, find some sort of an answer to the situation. So I remember we met on the Maidan on the one of the first days when I was there, and we briefly talked, and then I said, okay, maybe let's just do some project together. And the approach was somewhat simple. We walked around the streets of Kiev and photographed young people and made portraits. And I guess we really enjoyed doing this, even though we also really questioned ourselves, like, again, like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we photographing now young people in Kiev, who are kind of the most privileged people of all people you could photograph in Ukraine, probably. But the reason was probably that most of the people we photographed were actually almost craving for being in a picture, for being visible, for sending out some spare moment of, hey, there's not just destruction and blood in Ukraine, which you can see every day in the live tickers of all the online newspapers. but there's something to fight for, something to defend, which is like all the sort of creativity and culture that those young people, like the post-Maidan generation in a way, brings up. So this is how it started, yeah.
And your magazine is aiming also to these young people, or is what is the magazine project aiming at? The voice you are constructing or doing or making, which interesting-wise is also like an interesting reduction, right, of very different persons who are coming from very different backgrounds.
Correct. So Vsevolod and I, after taking the first portraits, were wondering what we would actually do with those photographs, because we didn't feel like this is like somehow a new story somewhere in any magazine somewhere in Europe. So the first idea we had was to make posters and like place the posters somewhere in the European capitals and make some sort of subtle propaganda. We ended up doing a magazine because while taking those photographs, we actually met a number of very inspiring other people that we felt like, they are interesting and maybe we should work together, such as Andri, who is one of our editors today. And so then suddenly we had some text, and then Sev and I, we also went to Bucha, and we made protocols of 2 people who were surviving the occupation day by day by day by day, and kind of reconstructed their 2 weeks with photographs and with text and so on. So essentially we had a bunch of content, and then the magazine was kind of a logical outcome. And yeah, we made a magazine. And the first idea was, again, the West. We want to reach the West, and whatever the West actually is. But eventually, the magazine was far more appreciated, I guess, in Ukraine and among young people in Ukraine than it ever was in the West, which is probably here. So for me, this was a very crucial moment, because usually, as a documentary photographer, I was about to go somewhere, to some sort of crisis place, and take photographs and bring them back home in a certain way and publish them somewhere here in some of the newspapers or magazines. In this case, however, it was completely different, because suddenly I was kind of bringing my, well, not pictures, but also like my background to the opposite, not opposite side, but like suddenly I had like some viewers where I would usually not have anybody viewing my pictures, but from where I would actually take the pictures away in a way and bring them to Germany or other places. Yeah. So who is the magazine aiming at? I think it's like in the dream imagination of an aspiring editor that never wanted to be an editor, I would say that the optimum would be to reach an audience which is mixed, which is both a Ukrainian audience, but both also a European audience, and to establish some sort of communication and to get a bit rid of this distance we talked about in the very beginning, and the othering of, somewhere in Ukraine there is war and this has nothing to do with us, but build some bridges, yeah.
Okay, so then we maybe incorporate the audience here and ask if there are some questions to the photographers, which is sitting here, or generally some annotations to the topic.
Who is the bravest?
Yeah, there must be somebody. There's somebody.
It's a question for Sebastian. How did you change from the German tourist to the aspiring editor? Can you give us some examples of that, like flashlights on those stages?
Maybe Mila can answer this question. That's a hard one. How did I change? I mean, in a way, I would still say that with all the efforts of trying to immerse myself into the Ukrainian context and especially into the cultural context, I'm still the foreigner. I'm still the tourist. I didn't grow up in Ukraine. I don't know what it means to have parents who, you know, went through the Ukrainian 90s that are in Berlin, a very romanticized decade, but have been a far more harsh and troublesome one in Ukraine. So I think I'm definitely still the tourist. However, of course, it's also a dialogue between being the tourist and though being very familiar with the place that I'm frequently traveling to, and that I build connections with many people that I really like a lot and that I really learned a lot from them. So the process of overcoming the tourist is probably more a way to like understand the tourist in yourself and also accept it, and yeah, be kind of okay with it. And then yeah, I will never be a Ukrainian. I'm from here. I grew up in Berlin, and that's okay, I guess. Yeah.
Are there some more questions?
Okay. I wanted to ask Julia about something. So you said that you're mostly working in the east of Ukraine, and some of your imagery or images are very, very sort of sensitive images and also topics. And I was just wondering, how do you go about with consent? So when you're taking pictures of, you know, people and you know that they're in a very, you know that their situation in that moment is very complicated and difficult. When do you know that you can take the picture, basically?
That's the question I always asked, and thank you for pointing on this. I would say I always put myself on the place of the person, and I always ask, would I be okay with this? If there would be like my home, my family. Usually you ask. Sometimes you show your camera first. Like I've never jumped into someone's face and like keep photographing. I'm trying to get like verbal or non-verbal content where it's possible. And once in 2015, I was a teaching assistant at National Geographic photo camp, and we had one of the photographers from the magazine come in, and he was showing his portfolio with one image which struck into my head. That was the father crying on the grave of his kid. And the photographer obviously was incredibly close. And that was the question I've asked, like, how did you do this? Like, how you did this content? Like, how should I operate in such sensitive situations? And he said, like, you should just be slow and respectful. That's something what I've learned from his experience, and that's something what I'm trying to keep doing in my life. And there were cases when people were okay, and then they were like, no, I don't want to be on the picture. Could you delete this? And I'm always okay with this. Because, you know, that camera creates a distance as well. But also camera gives you a privilege to be a reporter, not a victim or a defender, not a part of the situation. And you should be respectful for people for whom it's probably the most painful moment in their life. Once we were in Kyiv on the place of hit, it's residential building, and the woman just lost the apartment. They just moved there because they were like fleeing from Irpin, which was halfway occupied by Russia at that time. And I came closer saying like, hey, could we like get your number? I saw you, like you're in shock, but like maybe you're gonna be open to talk with us a couple of days after. And then she told such a powerful phrase, which I also remember. She said like, I guess that tomorrow it's going to even be worse. Yes, right now I'm shaking, but like I'm okay to talk. Like you could film, I'm gonna share my story, but tomorrow I'm probably gonna understand what the hell has happened. So you should be like also trying to stay in touch with people you meet. Share what you've got in the end. If you have any questions or like something disturbs you, if you worry about something, you'd rather not publish. That's like easy. And like I always try and like to talk to the editors, like, and with this image, I'm not sure, like, or once I've sent the image from my balcony where obviously there was a building hit by Russians previously, but there was their electricity substation nearby. And like I knew that somewhere in between there could be air defenses. I was like, maybe it's not the best frame to get published. And I just texted my editor saying like, could we please not use this one? Because I'm not sure. But of course, with the landscape, yeah, it could lead to something difficult, but with the exact human, sometimes it's even worse. So just like be slow and respectful, try to get verbal, non-verbal consent. Always show that you're taking pictures, not trying, like to sneak somehow. Like, I think that's disgusting. Even if someone's saying that it's the style, like it's disgusting, unethical and unprofessional, especially in the war zone. And try to keep in touch with the people you photograph or you filmed who shared their stories. That's it.
Are there some more questions?
Hi, this is for Yulia as well. I think the last, so many months we've heard this phrase like war weariness thrown around, especially in the West. So I'm wondering if you feel a pull to make images that grab attention or stay in the news, or how do you balance this with your desire to tell like very human stories?
I'm not competing for the attention. And we're Ukrainians, we're not competing. It's not a football game. It's not a competitions. We're not like competing with Gaza, I'm sorry. That's like, it's not about this. And yes, like audience is getting tired of any story. If you like keep hearing the same stories, especially if they're sad, you can't listen to the same sad story for so long. That's obvious. And that's why we're as storytellers, as Ukrainian storytellers, you just like find the way how to reach the audience. Like you find another visual language, you collaborate with another artist, like you make a magazine which could be represented digitally and accessible all over the world. So you don't need someone like to come to the event and listen to you. But we're not competing at all. Even with the fact that when I'm talking to you right now, someone is dying in my country and some Ukrainian soldier who protected me once getting injured. Even with this fact, it's not about competition. And we once had a chat with the colleagues saying that we cannot compete with Russia in creating content just because there are more people, there are more technical capacity. more film production companies, they're doing movies about Bucha and Mariupol, but fiction movies, stage shit, like creating narratives. And the only thing we as Ukrainian storytellers could do and how we could do our work done is just like keep documenting as much as possible. But as soon as you try to compete in like numbers, views, reaching, you're just gonna lose, because like in numbers, like how many days the whole world gave Ukrainian army? Like in how many days Russians said that they're gonna reach the capital? Like how many weeks the allies gonna say like, oh, probably 2-3 weeks, yeah, and then like Ukraine gonna fall. We're not competing, but we are keep fighting. That's it.
Hi, I have a microphone. I got it, so I will ask a question.
Female leadership, yes.
Julia, I remember your post about Maidan, and I remember also back then your photographs from Maidan. And I wanted to ask you, do you remember that moment, or maybe photograph back then, 10 years ago, when you realized that it's gonna take a while? And maybe you could kind of describe it?
Oof, that's a hard one. Okay. Honestly speaking, Maidan Revolution, when I was 20, that was like the most beautiful and most painful experience I've ever had. Because for me, it was such a specific moment of actually realizing who am I, what is my identity is, what is my country is about, what supposed I to do as a citizen. And I was freelancing that time, and on 18th of February 2014, when the trade union's house, which located on Independence Square and used to be a hospital, press center for media, and also humanitarian aid storage, it was on fire. Like riot police just like started the fire of the building. And what I did that back then, don't repeat in real life, please. So you just like think, oh, so I could have a top view. So I could get in and have a top view on the square, which was on fire as well, and the building is on fire. Not a clever decision. I'm not doing this like this anymore. Like you have one life and one stupid move like this. So I did it. And I had my colleague with me. So like we're coming on 4th and on 5th floor, something like this. And I saw the whole square on fire. And it literally reminded me the picture from a history book. It was like World War II. What the hell is this? It literally, the square on fire. And I had the really accurate feeling that tomorrow doesn't exist. I have no idea what's gonna happen tomorrow. Like here is this exact second. And that was like probably the moment when I realized that if there is so much blood, it would not end tomorrow. And same with ongoing phase of Russian-Ukrainian war. I keep saying like, it's gonna last like 5-10 years more. It started with such huge amount of blood, so it can't end in a second, just because this, like the cost is that high. The start of this pain is so huge, so it can't just disappear. We can't be kids and like just like shut our eyes saying like, oh, please, tomorrow, peace in Europe. no, it's not gonna work like this, unfortunately. And I remember this Maidan on fire, and I was like, okay, what if I would not exist tomorrow? Like, what if that the country would not exist tomorrow? What if, like, right police gonna win, and we're all gonna be kidnapped and arrested and killed, and no one gonna actually know what has happened? And that was the moment when I just had my camera on me. Same like during this war. You just like keep photographing. Is it the way how you like trying to, is it the way to cope with reality? Yes. Is it the way of therapy? Yes. Is it the way how, like what the mission is? Yes, as well.
Are there more questions? One last one.
Hi. Sorry, you might need to excuse my ignorance, but I kind of look at the photos here, and to actually look at the juxtaposition of both of yours portfolios up here, is that I kind of see three stories. One is the person's story, whoever you're photographing. The second is your story, or how you perceive it. And the third is, at least in the case of Julia's photos, the commercial company that's putting it out. So for example, The Guardian or Vice or Bloomberg. And so what I find interesting is I want to know kind of how do you, what happens with the second and third there? Kind of how do you make sure the line follows all the way through? But in the case where maybe you're not writing the words, you're simply supplying the photo, how do you make sure that the story you see kind of gets all the way through and it isn't lost and it just becomes a photo above some article that, you know, maybe?
I mostly like work with writer or reporter on the same story. So like I'm not like providing images for the article which already was written. So it just like illustrating someone's words. And even if the editor asks for this or like saying, oh, we are about to like to put such kind of story, I'm asking like, could I have a look before like I'm saying yes, that my image gonna appear and my name gonna appear next to or like words which I've never read before and like stories which I'm not familiar with and which like far from the image I'm done. So usually it's a collaborative process, and sometimes like my writer saying like, oh, could you photograph this? And I'm like, I'm totally okay with such art directing. But usually when you are on the ground, you just like, you work as a team. And some of my writers, they asking like, while they writing a story, they asking like, could you send me a portrait of that woman which I did? Because now I'm describing how her face looks like, and I'm like, I'd really love to have a close-up right now, because I'm like, I'm working on it. So it's always like a collaborative process, and I would be probably really pissed off if someone just like, let's say, use the photo I've done, use someone's face, just like to get more views or whatever, just to sell the story somehow. That's why it's rather on assignment stories, or if it's the story which were bought by media afterwards, they usually accompanied with my text or like big captions. So, and there are not additional words from somewhere and some bullshit. That's it.
Okay.
Just a bit curious, because we will have a look at the magazine downstairs, and like from my perspective, it's this kind of Ausweg that you chose to work collaboratively. No, that was wrong. Sebastian, can you tell us about the ups and downs in 2 sentences? No. Like your love-hate relationship with the activist potential photography can have or does not have, like the delusions, the hopes. Thank you.
I think in the beginning I very much had the idea of photography being a means of resistance and art in general being a means of resistance. Talking about ups and downs, I think I quit with this idea. And I think it's just photography in a way and also some writing. However, I think it's probably, and maybe this is what I try to do without having like theorized it properly, is just to create some sort of space, and a space that can be shared. It's like trying to build some, I don't know, building in a literal sense, where some people can come in and just be there as well, in a way. And I think that my photographs, or also our photographs, in the case of all the works I've done together with Salon, and also all the collaboration in general involved in the magazine, which is way more than 2 people, 2 more sitting in the back, Christian and Helena, hello, is yeah, to create a space where people are welcome and can communicate. I don't know if it works, but it sounds good, I think.
So, thanks a lot, Julia and Sebastian, to visit us today. It was a lovely conversation. I hope also for the people who are here in the room, they gained a lot of information and interesting details. There will be, for sure, Sołomiya on sale. I think we have some magazines here. We will hand them out. I don't know if they are at this table.
They are downstairs.
They are downstairs. They are downstairs. So you can have a look and take one home. Also, I would like to promote this book. Maybe you can say something?
A lovely promo section. Hey, so that's 13 Stories of War, made by Ukrainian War Archive, just freshly published in Sweden. It's available online. You could Google 13 Stories of War. It's all Ukrainian photographers, not just documentary hardcore stuff that I do, but also art and conceptual art. Feel free to have a look. Actually, that's a gift for FOTOTREFF family, but so please be gentle with this exact copy, because that should be a gift and dance, but it's available online. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.